one.
But I heard you saying, Colin, the Packers need to put on, I think you said some leather pants and unbutton their shirt down to their navel.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you were being literal or figurative there, but I know a guy they could acquire who I would imagine has some leather pants, and I think very often wears his shirt unbuttoned to the navel. And that's Odell Beckham Jr. You don't want him in Cleveland anymore.
No.
You got the 28th pick of the draft. You've got Devontae Adams. Odell, this would be what I'm hoping for my friend Odell, the Randy Moss career arc. Unbelievable first stop, kind of confusing second stop, and then he finally gets with a superstar quarterback, and he has nails in his third stop.
Nick's got plans for OBJ. We'll discuss that in a bit. Set that aside, though, talk some hoops. Kevin Durant's been sidelined for a month, but apparently he's going to continue to be sidelined. Still not 100%. He's set for more imaging on that injured leg next week, that injured hamstring, with head coach Steve Nash saying hopefully that'll help figure out when KD will be able to return. We got Chris Broussard with us now. Broussard, how worried should Nets fans be with Durant's lingering hamstring injury?
I think worried is too strong. Two more appropriate words for me are, one, surprised. Remember, when he got injured in mid-February, it was like he'll be out at least 2 games. So we're thinking, okay, this is nothing big. Now it's going to be 10, maybe 11, maybe 12. Who knows? So I'm surprised at this. The good news is that doctors are saying that it's not related to the Achilles. I'm not a doctor. I'll just take their word for it. But that's good news if that indeed is true. The second word is concerned. And it's not just the injury, or it's not even so much the injury to Durant. I'm concerned because at some point, they got to get their big three on the court together. What they're trying to do is already fairly unprecedented. Bring 3 superstars together and drop them into a lineup, and they win a championship right away. We saw Miami's big three couldn't do that. Remember, Elgin Baylor, Jerry West, Wilt Chamberlain couldn't do that. Charles Barkley, Clyde Drexler, Hakeem Olajuwon couldn't do that. And now they're going to do it playing just a handful of games. They got 35 games left. I would love to see them play 25 to 30 of them with their big three together. Now, I get it and I agree. Kevin Durant, more than any other superstar, can fit seamlessly into a lineup because of the nature of his game. Doesn't over-dribble, great jump shooter. Even his personality, he should be able to fit in. However, it's still an adjustment. And the role players have to adjust to having another superstar on the floor. Defensively, what's it going to look like? We already know that's a concern for this team. So that's my concern. It's hard to imagine them playing 15, 20 games together as a big three and going into the playoffs and just running through everybody and winning the championship. I'm not saying it's impossible because they look fantastic, but it's hard to fathom and, again, wholly unprecedented.
Well, look, guys, as the resident Nets super fan, I'm super concerned here. Because as a player, and I tried to articulate this and I tried to explain this when we were just talking about Dak Prescott and will he pick up where he left off? Well, your ankle goes, and now all of a sudden you start overcompensating. The body is like, oh, it's altered, so it's trying to figure out how to adapt, and now your knee go, your hip go, your lower back. These professional athletes' bodies are like NASCARs. If there's a little boat off, those drivers feel it. You feel it as an athlete. You hear guys come in the locker room right now. You come in the locker room, they're like, oh, my glute, my VMO's off. And you start seeing them doing some exercises, some corrective exercises to get that thing firing. So now you got KD. KD coming off of Achilles. And now all of a sudden, he have another nagging injury in a hamstring. This hamstring, if it's not dealt with correctly, it's going to be around for a long time. You have guys that can come back in 3 to 4 weeks, and then there's some guys it takes 3 to 4 months if it's not dealt with right. So it is concerning that he has to go in for more imaging. When I was playing for the Seattle Seahawks, that's what pretty much ended my career, coming off an ankle injury, and then all of a sudden it went up the chain, and then my hamstring went. Going back to my second year in the NFL, I had a quad injury. That quad injury put me out for 4 months. So this is concerning. And like you said, Chris, the other part too is these guys only played 7 games together. Now, they will be fine if he comes back towards the end of the season and he's healthy, because he is not the type of guy like LeBron James. LeBron James, if you take him out of that offense, everything drastically changed. These guys are still thriving. These guys are still finding a way to get it done without him. And now you insert this dude who is butter. He's a walking bucket, and he also is the ultimate team guy. They'll be all right. But this injury is a big concern, Nick.
Well, and listen, and they also need KD to be full go on both ends. He's their most important defensive player, and he has now played 20 games of basketball in 674 days. And so now we saw him when he started this season playing almost as well as he had at any point in his career, but it still is concerning. But yeah, like, I'm going to describe a team to you. This team was put together over the summer. Their second best player has a spotty at best postseason resume. They lack any form of rim protection. And their starting 5 has no minutes together to speak of. Who am I describing? Well, it's this year's Nets and last year's Clippers. And eventually, America's going to understand that what happened to last year's Clippers is the path the Nets are barreling towards. Now, not necessarily blowing a 3-1 lead in the second round. I'm not assigning that to them. But where they were ordained championship favorites without us ever getting to see these guys play together. That is very concerning. And so I do think that it is something that has to be discussed as a giant, not just a, well, let's monitor it, but something that has to start being factored into championship odds and start being factored into how good you think this team will become the postseason. Because, Wilds, maybe you disagree. If Durant's out, I don't think they can get out of round 2. But even with Durant, if they've played 12 games together, then I don't know if you can expect them to have the cohesiveness and continuity it's going to take to beat Milwaukee and Philly in consecutive series, much less beat the Lakers in the finals.
Okay, so if Steve Nash came out today, Broussard, and said, you know what, we're going to shut down KD for the entire rest of the season. It's an imaginary world now. We're going to see him in the playoffs. I wouldn't be that worried about it for the reasons that you talked about it. A, his demeanor kind of fits in with like, all right, I'll do what I need to do. 2, his game sort of works with that. 3, he's a basketball savant. He can watch the games, and I think there's more chemistry there from him watching and playing with those guys before. He's played with Kyrie enough, buddies with Kyrie, and he played with James Harden in Oklahoma City. So I'm not as worried. I don't think it's a fair comparison to say like, this is like the Clippers when Kawhi and Paul George never had a history of friendship or playing together. So I'm not nearly as worried as everybody else.
Yeah, I would be incredibly concerned. I would be worried if that was the point. You know, if he can't play the rest of the season. Because, look, Milwaukee, we like to write them off because of what's happened in the last 2 postseasons. But they're not going to be easy. They're not just going to run through the Bucks. And Philadelphia, the same thing. True. So these are world-class teams that they're going against. I just have never seen it. Nobody's ever seen it, Wilds. Like to drop, they would have had 7 games together. And you're right. I said it. Durant fits in great. But that's unimaginable that a team could play 7 games together and win a championship. Because that's what it's about. It's not about getting to the Eastern Conference Finals. It's not about even getting to the finals, especially now you bring in a Blake Griffin. It's about winning a championship. And so, yeah, I would think they couldn't win it if Durant's out the rest of the season.
So I got some historians around me, NBA historians around me. You guys tell me the last time we seen a team that had 3 prolific scorers like this. The offense is what's going to get it done. The offense is what's going to get them there. These guys will be fine if they're healthy going into the postseason. And, Nick, you keep talking about comparing this team to the Clippers. Last year was the perfect storm for LeBron James and the Lakers. Why? Because of his leadership. He is great. We know, all right, he's in that conversation as the GOAT. He had the #2 player in the NBA last year, not right now, but in AD playing lights out. So you got a Clippers team that didn't want to be in a bubble. Restart, there was 2 teams that said, we didn't want to play, and they were one of them. And then the other team, they had the best leader in all of sports. LeBron James galvanizes his team. So when you talk about the Clippers and comparing them to the Nets, you can't do it because it's a totally different situation. These dudes want to play. These dudes are just banged up right now. Yes, they've only played 7 games. It is a huge concern that KD is now dealing with this nagging hamstring injury. But the offense, that type of offense, these 3 guys, you got 3 guys that can give you 30 in a given night, and that's a problem. And I know you're going to talk about James Harden in the playoffs. I'm telling you right now, look at this kid's mindset. His mindset changed in a bubble. His mindset changed in a bubble. Okay. This is a different player than you guys have seen 10 years ago, 8 years ago.
Okay, well, I mean, the question